Hey there everyone, it's Jaycee. Welcome back to another perfect pairing with me. I'm still on the shaped card trend and I can't help myself but make another card. I received some feedback on my latest shaped card video. Thankfully, I thought this was a wonderful opportunity to demystify some questions you all had and show other ways to take your cards from boring to beautiful. Let's start with the card base. I have this Nesting Circles die set from Altenew. I feel like this is a card making die set staple, and the largest circle in the die set cuts a 4¼ inch diameter. In my case, I want to use the third largest circle, which is 3¾ inches, and play with an interesting frame on this card. I cut 2 circles from my 110-pound Nina Solar White cardstock, which is what I usually use for my card bases. And then an additional third panel cut from Vanilla Cream Crafty Necessities cardstock. After adding my watermark to the back of one of the white circles, I'll use my Crafter's Essential scoring board to score a 1/4 inch line. This line is to the right of the watermark if you're viewing the panel from the back. This will be my hinge that I glue the unscored panel to. So I'll add a strong liquid adhesive to this side of the panel so that when I add the front panel to the card, I get this wonderful concealed hinge to the card base. So this is the simplest foundation and most accessible card shape to use, and now we can just keep building on this base. I'll set this aside and leave the vanilla cream card panel for later in the project. As much as I like the circle, I just think an additional shape will create some interesting texture and contrast to the predictable circle. Here I have embossing cut decorative frames, which will quickly get way overused in my Altenew stash, I just know it. I cut 4 layers of plain white cardstock and an additional cardstock layer from Sand Dunes Crafty Necessities cardstock. After cutting all my layers, I'll emboss each image using the included embossing folder. The reason for all the additional layers is because I plan for this frame to slightly overhang the perimeter of the circle, and I wanted some sturdiness and dimension from this frame. I also wanted to emboss each layer instead of just the topmost Sand Dunes cardstock layer, because as you emboss cardstock, it has the natural tendency to pucker and slightly shrink, so I felt that this gave a more structured and sturdy base to glue all the layers together. After gluing all the layers together, I slightly distressed the cardstock frame with Rocky Shore Fresh Dye ink. This is from the same ink family as the Sand Dunes cardstock. I felt like this would give that slight maple wood color quality. I won't fully assemble any portion of the shaped card just yet, so I'll set this off to the side and work on the main elements of this shaped card. I'm loving the new July 2026 Craft a Flower Gerbera Daisy. Gerbera Daisies, just as flowers, come in so many different colors and variegations, so I wanted to take this opportunity to make a shaped card with some excellent color impact. Of course, the Craft a Flower system features the innovative keyhole alignment system, and this flower is a hefty 10 layers of petals with an additional 2 layers to finish the flower center. I already cut all the layers I plan on using on this card. I cut the petal elements from Peachy Glow Crafty Necessities cardstock, the flower centers from Dark Chocolate, and the leaves from Parrot. I cut 2 sets of the Gerbera Daisy petals and centers and 5 leaves of different sizes. Let's get to ink blending on these layers. First, let's add all the petal elements to the original sticky mat 9x12. I love that I can arrange all of these cardstock pieces on one surface to ink blend. Now, I want to add that pop of color. I did find this variation of a Gerbera Daisy on image search, and I couldn't help but recreate it on this card project. I will grab the number 7 detail blending brush. I wanted to concentrate a lot less color on the tips of the petals, so this blending brush is the perfect size for that. I usually use my mini ink blending tools, but in this case I didn't want a smooth blend. I wanted more of a veined appearance to the petals and a high concentration of ink right at the very tip. Just wait until the end for the result. I was just as surprised at how well this worked and came to life. The ink I'm using is Cherry Sweet Fresh Dye ink from Carnival Magic family of inks. And again, I'm using the detail blending brush to not swirl and scrub like I normally would, an ink blending tool. I am starting from the very tip of the petal and flicking this color toward the center of the flower. I want the veins that it leaves behind and an imperfect blend and transition of color to the center of the flower. On the top set of Gerbera Daisy layers, I'm pulling this color closer to the center. On the bottom set of layers, the color is more concentrated toward the tip of the petal. Then using the mini ink blending tool, I'll concentrate this color and completely saturate and fill the 6 through 10 layers of cardstock. I wanted a slight tonal variation between the two blooms, so on some of the 1 through 5 layers of petals, I added Fresh Lemon from Pocketful of Sunshine Fresh Dye ink set. I used a mini ink blending tool to do this, and the color is applied in an uneven shape. The idea is that I didn't want a flat area in the center of the flower of Peachy Glow cardstock, so I thought adding this pop of yellow would give the flower center some dimension. I waited a few minutes for the ink layers to dry so that my glued layers would dry completely when assembled. That just comes from experience. Now, I'll follow the layering instructions found on the Craft a Flower packaging, going in numerical order to assemble the flower. This includes the dark chocolate 11th and 12th layers. I'm intentionally separating layers 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. I want to give the 6 through 10 layers some dimension on the front of the bloom, and I thought it would be easier to curl these elements separately before gluing and assembling it to the 1 through 5 layers. I really wanted these to curl forward a lot more to create a raised dome appearance to the center of the flower. That finally finishes the assembly of the blooms. Let's move on to the Gerbera Daisy leaves. The leaves are pretty straightforward. This time I'll use the mini ink blending tool to add Misty Harbor and Green Onyx from Coastal Mist Fresh Dye ink set to deepen the Gerbera Daisy leaves. I felt like the blue shift would complement the primary palette happening on the flower petals. However, after the inks dry and settle on the leaves, the saturation will be much less intense and just enough to give some structure to the leaves. That will finish the ink blending on this card front. Let's wrap up one more element to this card with the sentiment. I used the sentiments from Build a Garden Blossoming Trio and the add-on die set to make my small sentiment. I stamped the Happy Birthday sentiment from Sand Dunes to match the Emboss and Cut Decorative Frames layer, and stacked 3 layers of this sentiment just to give more sturdiness. Now we can assemble this shaped card. I'm not going to glue the vanilla cream panel to the circular base yet, so I'll start with this most background panel on my Altenew cutting and alignment mat. If you're recreating this card and want it to fit in an A2 envelope or similar, you'll want to make sure that all your glued elements fit within the 4¼ by 5½ inch alignment guide on the cutting mat. If you don't have a mat with this outline, you can always use a regular 4¼ by 5½ inch scrap panel to use as a template. I'm cutting the decorative frame in half to elongate the shape on my card front and gluing it with a slight overhang on the top and bottom. Then after this, I fiddled with different arrangements of all my Gerbera Daisy elements. The main thing was to hide the areas of the frame that I cut so that it was this tall frame illusion. Again, these floral and leaf die cut elements need to be within the A2 template to help it fit in an envelope. It helped me to anchor the flower elements first, then embellish the shape of the bouquet with the leaves. Before I add the sentiment, I'll add white splatter with my favorite pure white ink spray. Then after gluing the sentiment to this open part of the arrangement, I also embellish the card with dazzling diamond stellar sequins. Now we can glue this to my shaped circular base, and that will finish this non-rectangular card with some structure. To address some of the input from my previous video, yes, this fits in an envelope. This is an A6 sized envelope, which is actually my preferred size to carry in my own home stash because I make thicker cards. I just like the way they look and feel with lots of dimension. A6 envelopes are 4 3/4 by 6.5 inches, which still take a forever stamp to mail in the US. The problem I have is that usually my cards are either more than 1 ounce or more than 1/4 inch in thickness, which makes it non-machinable. I will bypass this by putting the card in a flat rate envelope or a small USPS flat rate box. I usually include other items in the small box, so I don't mind paying the extra postage for special cards like this. I'm not a postal expert, so this is just my experience, throwing that disclaimer out there. But now you have another foundation and example of creating a shaped card base for a card that is sure to wow your recipient.